Now let's talk about infographics, because anytime you're creating a presentation, you want to make sure that your slides are clean and scannable. You want to help your audience understand your solutions and your ideas quickly. And that's why infographics are important. And what's even more important is creating infographics in PowerPoint. Because if you're creating your infographics in programs like Photoshop or Illustrator, and then you're importing them into PowerPoint, which I've seen so many times, then you won't be able to edit them right in PowerPoint. You have to go back to the other programs to edit these diagrams. And if anyone is helping you on the presentation and you're collaborating, you're going to make it very frustrating for anyone who has to collaborate on this file. So in this video, I'm going to show you 7 hacks that allow you to create infographics in PowerPoint. We're going to start with the newbie-friendly tools all the way to the complex SVG. So are you ready? Let's get started. So let's start with the fastest ways to create shapes in PowerPoint, and that is to use the custom shapes menu. Now the custom shapes menu is available from the insert menu. So I'm using right now PowerPoint on a Mac, and that menu is available here. If I click on insert, I'm going to see a drop-down menu that says shapes. Now you can access more shapes if you click on the insert and click shapes here, but it's not going to be the same menu. So that's why I always recommend that you use the one that comes out on the ribbon, the navigation top bar. Now, on a PC, some of the order of the icons might look different, but the functionality is the same. However, if you're using PowerPoint online, then some of these features might not be available that I'll be showing in this tutorial. I do know that many students are using the online version, and the online version is great if you're doing some text edits or you're combining quick slides and you want to animate them. However, you'll notice that some of the features that I'll be showing you, specifically with the shapes, will not work online. So do make sure that you're using a desktop version and that you have the latest version from Microsoft. And some of the features I'll be showing will only be available for people who have PowerPoint 360, which means you need to have an active paid membership for PowerPoint. If you're using a pirated version, an old one, or something that you have not updated in a long time, then some of these features might not work. So let's get started with the basic shapes, and that is to click on the insert menu and the shapes menu. Now when you look at it, they look very basic. There's nothing really fancy going on. However, there's something that you can do with PowerPoint that you cannot do with Canva and that you cannot do with Google Slides. And that is when you click on these shapes, you're going to find that they are reactive. So for example, you're going to click on this yellow icon here, and you'll notice that many of these shapes, when you click on them, they change in size, and the corner might change. So even though they look basic, they're going to give us the functionality to create many shapes just using these basic shapes as a foundation. So for example, I'm going to go here into the insert. I'm going to click on this square here that looks like it's 3D. However, when you notice with the yellow icon, if I click the slider, you can see here that I'm able to change the way this shape looks. Now, it doesn't look anything fancy or that I might be able to use that. However, I'll be able to break this shape apart and use it in other ways. So for example, if I click on it right now and I try to ungroup it, that's not available. However, I can convert it into an SVG file, and now I'll be able to edit it. And to do that, all you have to do is right-click and say Cut. If you're on a PC, you can click on Edit and Cut. And then I'm going to click again on the Edit or right-click, whichever one is easier for you, and click on the Paste Special. And by doing that, now I'm able to insert that file as SVG, which is a scalable vector graphic. And vector means it's mathematical, which means that no matter what size the object is, it's still going to look sharp. It's not like a pixelated image. Whereas if I paste it as a PNG, I will not be able to edit that. So I'm going to click on the SVG and say OK, and now I've got an SVG graphic. Now it still looks basic, but however, I can break this apart and now use the components. So if I right click and try to ungroup, it's not going to let me to ungroup it yet, and that's because Microsoft is not recognizing it as a graphic. So what I have to do is I have to right right click first and say convert to shape. Now that I've converted it to shape, PowerPoint is understanding it as 5 different pieces instead of 1. And I can right click again and say ungroup. And so now by doing that, I've got a shape that I can manipulate. So I'm going to move these items slightly, just 2 steps on each side. And you can see here how I've created this shape that now I can recolor. So I'm going to go using my brand color, because I'm using the theme colors from my brand and making sure that everything is colored according to my brand. And now I can turn this into an infographic simply by doing the shape. Notice what I'm going to do. I'm going to regroup it again, turn it on its side, and now I have a shape that would have taken me a long time to create, and I can turn it into an infographic that looks like this. Now let's take some of the other shapes as well, and I'm showing you some of the shapes that I use on a daily basis. For example, this innocent here rounded rectangle, you can change that. For example, you can do something like this to it, and now you can manipulate it to create shapes that's going to help you create more infographics beyond what it looks like, and even with this corner here. So using these shapes as well with some of this triangle, you can see here with the triangle, you can move it to the side, something you cannot do with Canva or Google Slides, and I'm able to create infographics that look like this. And you'll see here it's very easy to edit. So for example, if we're changing the numbers, or if I wanted to create animation, now I can animate all of these because it is live objects, and I can create timelines, I can create diagrams like this, or even process diagrams, where you can see here I'm using the one with the straight edge, and everything is still editable. So in case I needed to adjust the corners, I'm able to do that. For example, if I wanted to make a 4-step instead of 3, or a 2-step, you can see here it'll be very easy to do that because they're very easy to manipulate. Or even create dashboards that I can use to show data and traction. So it's going to give me this look that looks very refined simply by using these shapes. Something like this as well. You can see here I'm using the triangle, the one here with the rounded corner, and a square, and I'm able to create something that looks different. Now with the circular one, and you're going to be able to access that as well here from the drop down menu, you're going to have the one that's a full circle or the one that looks more like an arch. Now I like this one here because I can use 2 items. So you can see here I've got one in the background that looks darker and one on top that has the brand color, and now I'm able to adjust this to create charts that look something like this. So you can see here if I'm showing data, it's very easy, and if the numbers change, I don't have to go and do this in Photoshop or start creating extra charts. I'm able to do these edits quickly as well. Or even if I wanted to create a diagram like this, this is also going to be easy, and I can animate depending on the percentage that I wanted to show. So you can see here how it becomes easier. Now with these shapes as well, they look innocent. However, when you click once again, you're going to notice that you are able to do something with them that you're not able to do with some of the other shapes using other programs. You can see here with this shape and with this shape here as well. So by really turning them around and changing the orientation, and let me show you something here that's going to help you do that. If you go onto the home and use the arrange, you're able to click on the rotate and flip horizontally, or you're able to flip vertically, so you can change the way the object is placed. And you can also right click and say format shape and have a little bit more control by clicking here on the edge. So you can see here you're able to lock aspect ratio, so in case if you wanted to make it bigger, or if you want to make it smaller, if you wanted to rotate with precision. So if you're using that rotate tool, and you're using the mathematical formulas, it'll make it much easier for you. And doing that, now you'll be able to create diagrams that look like this, like this, like this, or even something like this. Now if you notice with this shape, I'm using 2 live objects. The one that had that corner, if you remember this one here that changes sides, and in the center, guess what this one is? It is using the 8-pointed star. And notice how I was able to change the corner. So the 8-pointed stars look like this, and just by doing this live dynamic edges, I'm able to make it fit with the rest of the components. And now I have a 5-piece infographic that explains how 4 elements are combined in the center, so I can visualize that data and the message I am sharing. And using this shape here, I'm able to create complex shapes that might not have been easy with PowerPoint. And I'm able to, of course, do animations. For example, maybe if I wanted to animate one at a time, I can have one slide where only one is showing like this. And then with the animation using the morph, now I can make things move around and convey that message visually. Something else that looks very innocent is these square and the circle here. Notice they are also dynamic and they change, and I have used them in many occasions to create cover slides as well. And that's why in all my templates I always have the title slide. The first one I keep it blank because I like to give the users and my client one option where they can make some custom shapes so that their templates don't always look the same. However, it has the same font and the colors, and they've got their logo, and of course they do have the ones that have a standard image placeholder, but I also like that flexibility with a title slide that allows you to create variations using shapes, or if you have a product image as well. So you can see here with the circle and with this square. Now let's take it up a notch and see how we can use these shapes and now merge them and subtract and create some fancy shapes using vector objects in PowerPoint. So we're in this scenario, we're going to go to option number 2, which is the merge shape. Now in PowerPoint, when you click on one shape only and you click on the shape format menu item, you're going to notice that there's something here on the side. Let me just move it so you can see it a little bit bigger. There we go. It says edit shape. Now with that edit shape, you can click on the item and very quickly change shape. So for example, you can just change shape, and let's say you want to use a heart. You'll notice here how automatically with PowerPoint you can do that. So you can change the look of objects just by choosing something from the menu. However, you'll notice that there's something below that says merge shape, and right now it's grayed out, and it's grayed out because I'm only clicking on one item. However, if I click on two objects, notice how that menu has become live now, and when I click on it, you're going to notice I have 5 different options that were not available before, and that's the union, combine, fragment, intersect, and subtract. So let me show you how they work and how by using these features with the common shapes that come from PowerPoint, you can take your infographics to the next level. So let's start with the union. Now, before I show you what each one does, I wanted to bring to your attention that depending on which item you click first, PowerPoint is going to give that color dominance. So for example, if I click on the white first, and I'm going to click on shift and click on the blue, so now I have 2 selected, and I go into the union, notice how everything has become white. However, if I click on the blue first, and then I click on the white, and I go into the shape format here, let's just go here, and I say union, now it has become blue. So keep that in mind. It depends on which item you've clicked on first. However, if I just click and drag and select both items, what PowerPoint will do, it's going to give dominance to whatever object is on top. So if I'm going to go in here and say union, notice it has become white. However, if I bring the blue, I'm going to right click on it and say bring to front, so that way it'll be on top of the white one. And now I click on both of them and I say shape and I click union, now it has become blue. So keep that in mind. Whichever you click on first or whichever is on top will be the dominant one. So with the union, you've already seen that. If I go in here and say union, well, now they've become one object. Now, if I had to draw this on my own, it's going to take me a long time to draw that. Of course, there is that option to draw. So for example, if you click here on the shapes, there's that option here with the line, and you can really draw lines. However, if you try to use that option, you're going to find when you zoom in, it doesn't look that clean. You've got too many points in it, and it's going to become very finicky unless you know how to edit points, which I'm going to show you in a bit how to do that in PowerPoint. So that's why I like these features. Now with the combine, notice what's going to happen. So I'm going to click on the white first, then the blue, and then I'm going to go on into combine. Now you'll notice that it combined the items that were separate. However, what was intersecting the items, it took that out. Now once again, I would not be able to create that on my own if I was drawing it. So using this option, I'm able to create a new feature. However, the one that I use the most is the fragment. I love this this one because it gives me a little bit more control. So I'm going to click on the white and on the blue, and I'm going to go in here and say fragment. Now notice what happened. All it did is it fragmented the shapes. And I like this because now I'm clicking on all these options. So I'm going to click here and color the first one light blue. Then this one is going to be slightly darker, and now I can make the center. So I want to give that illusion that they are overlapping, however they're different pieces. And the reason I like them to be different pieces because now I can animate them separately. You can see here if I wanted to show that one area is coming in and then they're overlapping, it gives me a little bit more control than just having two items that are transparent. You can see here I can get that effect with transparency. However, I do prefer to have the shapes separate so I'm able to animate them and have a little bit more control on the items. Now let's take a look at the intersect. I'm going to once again click on each item and go into the menu. Let me just expand that again so you can see it here. And I'm going to click on intersect. And notice now with the intersect, I'm able to get the center part. So it's giving me what was in the center, not on the edges. Now it looks like something you might not need. However, if you're creating infographics, now I'm able to take these shapes or whatever shapes I have created, and I'm able to move them around and rotate them with precision, give them different colors, and I might be able to create circular items. So I'm able to create shapes that would be difficult to do in PowerPoint. And the last but not least is the subtract. Now, if I click here on the subtract, notice what's going to happen. It's going to end up taking one of the items and it's giving me that extra shape. And the way PowerPoint is giving dominance is whatever is on top or whatever you click on first. So if I click blue and then white, and then I click here and say subtract, notice that it took out the white, but it kept the blue because that was what was there. So keep that in mind, and depending on what objects you're using, now you can create these complex shapes that you were not able to do just alone with PowerPoint. Now, next up, I'm going to be showing you how to edit points more with precision. But before we do that, I wanted to show you how the subtract and the combining and the fragment can help you create shapes and infographics. So let's, for example, take this shape here. So what I did is I took that rounded corner rectangle, I made it a little bit narrower, and I made the corners rounded. And now with that, I've created different areas simply by rotating it. So you can see here, I've got my first one at the top, and then the one at the bottom, which I have rotated like this, and I put these three items together. Now notice what's going to happen if I click on all of them all at once and then go here to the menu and I choose a fragment. Now I've got all of these pieces that I now can combine in another format. So first of all, I'm going to take out the center, then I'm going to click on this item, and let's see here, this item and this item, and now I'm going to combine them again, and so I'm going to color them so I can see how they're fitting together, and this one as well. Let's just combine them, and I'm going to go here union, so I've got a third item, and then now the fourth one union, and let me just give it a different color. So you can see here now I've created different shapes that I can now manipulate and create more diagrams. For example, I can create something like this, which would have been very hard to do in PowerPoint on its own. Now let's take another example. Let's take this circle. Remember the circle that I showed you a bit earlier? So what I did is I put the circle here and I used the square item. So this is very simple. All I'm using is the circle and the square. And with the square, I'm able to just bring some items like this. And I've created these three that I positioned in this particular order. Now notice what's going to happen once again if I fragment. I'm going to take all of these items and I'm going to click on the shape and I'm going to say fragment. And by doing that, now I can go in and delete some items that I don't need. For example, these edges, let me just delete the ones that I don't need. And notice what I have just created here. I've created this shape that I can now as well turn into an infographic that looks like this. So this is something that I would not have been able to draw alone in PowerPoint or even Canva or Google Slides. So you can see now how by combining the basic shapes that come from PowerPoint and using the shape tools, the merge tools, we're able to create even more shapes. Now let's take it up a notch and use something called edit points. So with the edit points, we're going to have a little bit more control over the shapes that we are creating. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to click here and say insert and click any shape. So for example, let me click and choose this particular hexagon. Now you can see here I still have the live edge on with the yellow dot. I can still do that, but that might not be enough. Maybe I want to move one corner more than the other. So to do that, I can right click on it and choose something called edit points. And by doing that, now I'm activating the vector capability. Now, if you've ever worked with a program like Adobe Illustrator or Corel Draw, then you know how that feature works. It's called vector graphic arts, and it gives you that precision using these points and the handles that allow you to create curves and shapes that would be very easy to, that would be harder to do if you're trying to draw them in manually. Now, the way with PowerPoint works, it's not going to be as advanced as Corel Draw or Adobe Illustrator. However, it has the basics. So if you wanted to make some smooth curves or adjust the shape slightly, then you'll be able to do that in PowerPoint, which you are not going to be able to do in Canva, at least at this point, or even Google Slides as well. So this feature, the way it works is you're going to notice that there's points, and these are the points that you can edit. You can move their location. Something else you can do is when you click on them, you're going to have these handles. Each point has two handles. So you can click each handle separately. You can see here by manipulating each handle, I'm able to adjust the corner of each edge. And if I right click on the handle and I choose, this is right now it's a corner, so that's why they are independent of each other. But if I click on the straight point, notice how now they are connected. So if I move one point, the other handle is moving with it. So it's going to give me a different manipulation to it. And the straight point, let me just see, this one's called the straight point, and the smooth point, they act the same way, where the handles are still together. However, the smooth point is going to give you a little bit more of a smoother curve. So if I go to this edge here and I choose smooth point at the same time, you're going to notice I'm going to get a little bit more of a smoother edge on the side. So you can see here how by using this menu, I'm able to have a little bit more control that would not be enough if I was trying to draw it on my own. And something else that you can do is not only as a shape on its own, you can convert that into an open path, into a line. And this is going to come in handy, for example, if you have an object, but you don't want to have it as a fill. So for example, maybe I want to have no fill and I only wanted to have an outline. Let me make the outline a little bit thicker so you can see it. So what if I wanted to open that outline and manipulate the line? Maybe I just want this curve and I don't want this edge. So the way to do that, I'm going to right click on it here and say open path. Now you can see here by opening the path, now this has become separate. So I can right click on these points and I can delete the points that I don't want. So you can see here I'm deleting these points. And now I'm ended up with a line that looks something like this, which I might not have been able to draw on my own. So you can see the power now by combining these features, which is right here by using the edit points and also using the combine, the union, combine, fragment, intersect, and subtract. I'm able to take all of these shapes that come out of PowerPoint and take them to the next level and create really infinite shapes and lines and curves that I can add to my infographics. So now let's move on to another option, and that is the SmartArt option. Now, PowerPoint comes with an option as well right under the insert menu, and it's called the SmartArt option. So it's a quick way to create diagrams. Now, this is a great starting point if you've ever worked with any of them. They're great, but you're going to find that they become a little bit finicky, especially when you start adding a lot of text, but they're a good starting point. So I always use them as a starting point. So for example, if I wanted to create a graphic, a circular graphic that has different elements. So for example, maybe I want 1, 2, let me just do here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're going to notice it doesn't go beyond 7. But if I wanted to create an infographic with 7 options, now I do have that option. Now, if you started to add text and use some of the options they have here, you're going to find that it becomes a little bit finicky. It's not able to handle a lot of text, especially when you start adding the text to itself. So one of the fastest ways is after you've created that shape, let's say you need some elements, maybe you need one segment, you need 2 or 3 segments, or you need that arrow, you can right click on it here and use the ungroup feature. Now, if you don't see the option from the right click, do check the edit. I think it is under the edit as well, or let me just see, where is it? Is it under arrange on the Mac? It's under arrange. I'm not sure where it's under PC. You're going to find the ungroup option as well, and of course the rotate and the align and distribute, but in this particular case we're looking for the ungroup. So you'll notice now that I've ungrouped it, I'm able to take different elements and I can ungroup it again. And you can see here now I have each of these segments that I can use as a separate graphic. So for example, if I wanted to create, let me just show you what I did here. So if I take it into the view, notice that I can take these different elements and now animate them, which I would not be able to do if I had left it as a smart object. So that's why I do use the smart object as a starting point. I break them apart and then I'm able to take some of these elements. Now, if you find this option annoying, you notice here how when you're breaking things apart that you end up having this extra piece. Well, now you know how to solve it, because you can go into the insert and take any object. So for example, if I take this box and I draw it on top of this one here, and now if I pick the 2 objects and I go into the elements here, let me just go into the is it picking up both elements? Let me just pick up this one and this one, and I go into the fragment, notice that now I'm able to fragment and use this point alone. So anytime you have this extra options and you're not sure how to deal with that, use the fragment and then you'll be able to have the exact shapes that you wanted. And this is going to give you different shapes that you can combine or take some of this arrow and create animations that you might not be able to do alone with this smart object. Now, the next option is to use the charts options in PowerPoint. Now, charts look innocent, but they can also help you create segments beyond 7 points. Now, if you remember, with the SmartArt, we were only able to go up to 7 areas. Well, what if you wanted to create an infographic with 11 or 12 segments and you wanted to have that circular shape? Well, you can do that now with the charts option. So let me show you how you would go about doing that. So I'm going to click on the insert again, and this time you'll notice here it's called charts. So I'm going to click on the pie chart, and instead of choosing the default, which most people use, I'm going to use the donut. So I'm going to take this donut here, and it's going to open Excel for me when I start any chart in PowerPoint. So this is where I get to control. For example, if I wanted to have, let's say I wanted to have, let's see, 8, 9, let me just choose 10 to show you as an option here. And I want them to be equal in size. So I'm just going to make sure that the size of each of these segments is going to be the same size. So that's why I'm using 1. Let me just zoom in so you can see it here. So you'll notice I've got 10 options, and instead of sales, I mean, it's not going to show, but if you wanted to label it, you can say segments. And I made sure that they are the same number. It doesn't matter what number you put, but make sure it's the same number so they come out equal sizes. And now you can exit Excel and go back into PowerPoint. And now I can click here and delete the text, which I don't want. And now I've got this donut shapes that I can take, merge and subtract and turn into an infographic. However, before I do that, I'm going to right click here and I'm going to choose the, where is that option here? It is called, I think I need to be on the options, a format data point. So by doing that, I'm going to open the right panel, which is going to give me that data, format data points. And now I can adjust the sizes of these segments. You can see here if I wanted to create an infographic with this many segments, and if I wanted to give it a little bit 1 point on the side, or if I click on all of it and now give it equal edges. So for example, if I wanted to have a little bit of separation, I can go in here, remove the line. I don't want a line. So you can see here I have these segments that I can now turn into an infographic. And if I don't want it to be a chart anymore, now you know how to deal with that. You can go into here, and if you try the ungroup, it's not available. You can use that same feature that we did before. If you remember, I went into here and I said edit cut, and then I went in here again and said edit paste special, and now I can insert it as an SVG, and now I'm able to convert to shape, and then I'm able to ungroup, and now I have these elements, and I'm able to put icons on top of them and create infographics, and then end up creating something that looks like this. Now, if I had to draw this manually, or I had to sit and cut each segment, it's going to take me so much longer. So using the charts, you're going to be able to create faster infographics as well. Now, let's take it up a notch and go and use something with the custom icons. Now, if you're using the Microsoft 360, then you have the access to the icons. So let me show you where that would be at. Once again, I'm going to click on Insert, and I'm going to click on Icons. And when you do that, you're going to get on the side here, you're going to see that there are many icons that look simple, but many of the shapes that you might need to add to your diagrams. So let me go in here, and I'm going to choose a burger to show you an option. So I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to recolor it so you can see it, and I'm going to make it bigger. Now notice what I can do with this burger. If I try to edit it on its own, I'm not going to have a lot of options. However, if I convert to shape, notice that now I can take up the cup and I have the burger, and I can use some of the editing points, change the size of the burger. I can go in here, change the color. So for example, if I wanted to make this look like a bun or a burger, so something like this, that would be an option. I can also do something that looks like a dial. So I'm going to show you something that I like to do here. So dial, or I think it's called speed. Let me just see. There it is. So I'm going to click on this one and use that color. And once again, I'm going to right click and say convert to shape. And now I'm able to take this shape here and then use it with a circle. So I can add a circle, and I can add extra points to it, kind of like what I did here. You'll notice I've already started with that. I took it out from the dial, which I had used this one. I added a circle, and I used the subtract. I took out the subtract. And by doing that and using the chart, so if you remember, I used the chart to create these segments. So you can create a chart with 6 and delete 3 of them and only keep 3. You can have half a circle, and then having this element here that I had just drawn using the elements from the dial, I was able to create this infographic. And now, because it's done in PowerPoint, I'm able to animate it. So let me show you what I mean when I show the animation. So here it is with the animation. You'll notice I'm using the morph. So slide 1, which had this option here before, and then slide 2 had this. And using the morph, now I'm able to create something that looks very elevated, even though I created all of this using the charts, using the icons from the PowerPoint, and some of the shapes that are there. Nothing advanced. I did not need to go to Photoshop. I did not need to go into Illustrator. So do experiment with some of these icons. You're going to find that there are so many in here that you can subtract and extract and break apart and use some of these elements to create your own custom shapes. Now let's take a closer look at this particular infographics, because it shows everything we have learned so far. So if I go into the elements here on its own, and you're going to notice that what we have is, I'm going to ungroup it, because right now you can see that the functionality of this dial is turning from left to right. However, because this is a shape on its own, let's see here, if I ungroup everything, let's make sure you can see here, because we've got a grouped object. So I'm going to make sure everything is ungrouped so you can see exactly how this was constructed. All right, so now we have all the elements. So step number 1 is we've got this semicircle here, which was being flattened out. Then we have these elements here, segments, which were created with a pie chart. So all you have to do is go in here into the insert, create a pie chart, and create a 6-segment pie chart. You can now fragment it, take out the bottom, and you're left with the top 3. So you can use them here with layering. Then on top of that, we have another semicircle. So you can take a circle and crop it using the fragment tool as well, and you can line them on top of each other. And you can take this element that we have created here up, where was it? It was the one that was here with the combination of the dial that was created, and now you can combine them together. However, if you try to make this dial turn, it's not going to turn properly. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that it has an equal height and length. So what I did is I created, there's somewhere in here, there it is, there's an invisible box. You can't see it right now because I made it hidden. However, if we're choosing the color, where is the color? Format shape. Let me just make sure it's solid, just the square. There it is. I'm going to make a solid color and I'm going to make it blue so that you can see it. So you can see here, this box was actually, let me choose a color that you can see, maybe a yellow. So we've got this box, and what I did is I had to take this dial and make sure that it fits evenly on the top and the bottom. Actually, let me choose another softer color on the eye and turn this one around here. So when you're making sure that things rotate properly. So this is what I did. I made sure that they are, first of all, center. I made sure arrange, align, center. And then just for the sake of making sure everything fits, I clicked with the box and I used the arranged, and I made sure everything is centered with the box, arrange, and align, everything is centered in the middle. So now I know that these shapes are going to work together very well. I'm going to delete the bottom one because I don't need it. I just need the top one and I need the box. However, I don't want the box to be visible. So I'm going to click in here and say no fill. And while it's still selected, I'm going to click on the dial, and now I'm going to right click and group them. And by doing that, oh, they did not group very well. Let me just click here. Right click, group, group. So now they are grouped. Now because they're grouped, you can see here the dial has a much smoother turning because it's the whole box that's rotating with the equal height from the top and the bottom. So now I can bring in this dial here and add it to the point, and now I'm able to animate it and create this section. So you can see here, by combining all the features that we just learned, we're able to create complex graphics. And of course, you can add your own text and then use some of the slide layouts. You can see here I'm using the title, subtitle, and adding diagrams. You can even have 3 side by side and use it for traction. But now you can see the power of combining all of these features together to create something that would have seemed impossible in PowerPoint. And now with that said, we're ready to move on to the next step and take it up a notch using stock items from PowerPoint. Now going on to number 6, I'm going to show you a feature that very few people know about. I mean, I only learned about this recently because I never really looked in that option. And that is when you are in the stock option, you're going to notice that there's another drop down arrow here on the side. And that's of course for people who are paying the membership. And you're going to find that there's an option here. Let me show you the different options that you can use. And that is the cutout people. So cutout people, these are photos, so they might not come in handy if you are creating infographics that need editing. However, if you wanted to create a diagram and something and add these people, different shapes and people to add to your message, you can do that. Something else that you can use is the stickers. Now the stickers are pictures, so they're not really editable. However, they can add a little bit of color if you're creating an infographic and you want to convey the feeling of how that process is. Maybe is it a happy, a sad feeling? You can add some of these on the side, but they're not editable. Or you can click on the cartoon people. Now, I've never used that, but it is an option if you wanted to give some element to your slides. And once again, if you right click on these, you can convert to shape. So you'll be able to take some of these elements from these graphics. For example, if you wanted to create that shape, and now because I converted it, I can ungroup it. Maybe all I need is this shape. So let me just ungroup again. So you can see here, and then I can delete the rest. So you can see here, you're not really stuck with the options, but you can look through the elements and see what can I extract to use for my diagrams. Now, the one I wanted to show you is the illustration, which is has a bit more complex shapes. So for example, if I click here on this flower, and you notice if I try to color it, I can only color with one options. However, if I right click and I say convert to shape, and now I have so many options, and I can take all of these shapes and break them even more apart and create different designs as well. So let me show you what I did with this particular option here. I think it was trees. Let me see. Yeah, this one here. So I used this trees and then I converted it, and I took this tree and I was able to create something to explain a business model. So you can see here in the next slide, I used that tree from this shape and I was able to cut out the top and just keep some of the elements. And I was able to create a business model slide to explain that most of the income is coming from B2B energy solutions. We've got B2C energy solutions or technology. And this element here is from the icon. So you can see here, by using some of these graphic elements, you're going to find some of the wavy clouds in here as well. So if you look for clouds, let me see here. Clouds is there. Yeah, you can see here some of the clouds that you can use, mix and match. And from the icons, I was able to create a slide that looks a little bit more visually pleasing, and we don't have to put it in bullet points. So rather than say we have 3 revenue streams with 3 bullet points, now we're able to explain it more visually. So do experiment with some of these shapes, and look here how I was able to find all of these shapes right from here, and I was able to extract them. And you can also use them not just for infographics, you can also use them to create cover slides. Now, if you remember, in my templates, I always keep that title slide empty. You can see here on the side, I'm able to create something like this, or even something like this, which is going to look a little bit more refined, and it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. So all I did was mix and match some of the elements that are coming here from the stock images right in PowerPoint. Now let's take it up even a step further and go into advanced scalable vector graphics. So I'm going to show you how to jazz up your slides and diagrams using commercial or custom SVG files that you import from somewhere else. Now, if you take a closer look at the template here right now, which is using the Magnus Contemporary PowerPoint template. Now, that's a template that's available on my store that you can buy. And if you take a look behind the scenes, you're going to find that there is different cover slide options. We've got the right and left image. We've got the section break as well that has all been designed to fit this rounded shape. Now, you might be looking at the shape and thinking, well, how am I going to create this in PowerPoint? And this could get tricky because these rounded edges with a triangle, it can get tricky. Now, of course, you can still do that. You can sit in here and experiment and use the triangle. For example, here, you can convert it using the edit points, and now you can sit using these. Let me just see here. If we make it smooth, you can sit and try to create this curved image, but it can get tricky because you can see here, it does get a little bit finicky. However, it is, if you're willing to spend time and do all of this, it can be done in PowerPoint. But there's a much simpler way if you're using a tool specifically that creates these rounded edges. Now, in my case, I use a tool like Adobe Illustrator. Now, I understand you might not have Adobe Illustrator, but if you understand how it's done, then you can ask your designer. For example, if you're outsourcing or if you're collaborating with the designer, then now you know what you can ask them. So you can see here for the template, what I did is I created these shapes in Adobe Illustrator for the cover slide as well as the image placeholders. And the way they were done is using a triangle tool. So I'm going to click here on the side. I'm just going to show you how it's done. And I'm going to click and choose that I need a 3-sided object. And I'm going to click OK. Now there's an option that's available in Illustrator that's not available in PowerPoint. And that is when I click on the edges, I can create these rounded points. So you can see here how I'm able to create rounded shapes, and now by turning them around, cropping them, and using some other point manipulation, I'm able to create these shapes. However, if you don't have Illustrator and you still want to create these curved edges so that you can have diagrams with rounded edges, there's a free tool that you can use, and that is called Figma. Let me show you how that works. All right, so here we are on the Figma website. So if you look at the pricing option, you're going to find that they have a free account, and that's all you need if you're just going to be creating SVG graphics and exporting them as SVG. So you can see here, I've already have an account, and what I did is I created a triangle, and you're going to notice that just like Illustrator, I'm able to create these round edges. So you can find the shape that you need and create these round edges, and when you're ready and you want to export it into PowerPoint, all you have to do is click on the export here at the bottom right, and you'll see the options right now. The default is PNG. We don't want PNG, so I'm going to click and make sure that I'm clicking on SVG, because now you remember how we're going to be using SVG in PowerPoint. And if you wanted, you can rename it here right away, because you can see here it's just calling them polygon. But if you wanted to give it a name, I'm not sure, icon, let's say icon 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to call it. And now when you click on it and you go here on the side and say File, export, right away you're going to see what's going to happen. It's going to be exporting that icon, and when you click export, it's going to download it to your computer. And now when it's downloaded to your computer, that SVG file, you're able to import it into PowerPoint and use it on your slides. So let me show you how that's going to work. So for right now here, we've got a blank slide. So I'm going to go into the folder, and I already have here a rounded triangle. So this was exported from Figma. You'll notice here once again, we've got that shape. All I have to do is say convert to shape, and now PowerPoint understands it. And now I'm able, if I wanted to, also click on edit point and make some changes as well. And for the file that I created in Illustrator to create the shapes for this particular template, you can see here once again, I can bring it over. So this is my Illustrator file that was saved as SVG. I can right click here, convert to shape, and now I can take these elements, and you can see here using these elements I was able to now create the cover slide. So let me show you how that's going to look like when you go into the cover slide. So here I've got the cover slide, and I was able to create these image placeholders. Now if you want to know how to create image placeholders and how to create your own templates, do check out my tutorial on YouTube called the PowerPoint Template Masterclass. It's going to take you into the all the details of creating your own particular theme and template. But for now, I wanted to show you how you can jazz up your slides, how you can create custom shapes and create custom templates and themes in PowerPoint if you know how to use scalable vector graphics. Now, you can do that yourself, you can draw them, but of course, you can also buy commercial files, or you can download SVG files from somewhere else. Now you can find thousands of infographics on commercial websites that you can also buy and import into PowerPoint. So some of the resources that I use is Envato Elements. Now I have a membership there, and you're going to find that they have thousands of infographics that could be a good starting point. So if I don't want to spend hours creating some custom shapes, I can go in there for inspiration, or I can download a template. Now what I like about Envato Elements is, for example, if I like this particular file and I want to download some of the elements and use it in a client project, Envato Elements allows me to assign a license to a particular client project. So that's why whenever I am going to commercial options, I usually go to Envato Elements because it has that transparency with the licensing. Now with Adobe Stock as well, I just have to make sure that anytime I'm using it for a client project, I always buy a new one if I'm going to use the same graphic for another client project. Or sometimes I flag the client and tell them to buy a license in their own name, and that way we can use the infographics for their projects. Or if you wanted to use some of the graphics and put them in commercial templates that you plan to sell, you can also buy an extended license. You can see here for about $100 Canadian, which is about 80 US dollars, you can get all of these shapes. Now this is going to save you a lot of time, because if you had to spend hours creating this, it's going to take you so much time. So you can just download an extended license and you have access to all of these files. Now keep in mind that in Adobe Stock, the files are still in Adobe Illustrator, so you have to convert them to SVG. So if you don't know how to do that, you can ask a designer, or you can find free SVG tools online where you can take an Illustrator file and convert it. Or if you are on Envato Elements, you have the option to download as SVG right away, and of course assign a license. Something else that I signed up to recently, about a few months ago, to this website here, it's called the Noun Project, because they've got over 5 million icons. And what I like about this website is they have a lot of the icons that are free and in the Creative Commons. So you're able to take them, extract them, and use them commercially. So do check it out. There's a lot of free icons. Otherwise, I think, I can't remember, it was something very cheap. You can buy it, get the annual license, and you have 5 million icons, and many of them have a license with a commercial use. So you can use them with unlimited projects. You can even embed them in your file. So do make sure that each icon you click on, you check the license for each particular icon, because it doesn't apply to the entire store. It applies per license. So the way you would do that, let me just click here. For example, if we're searching for horses, let me just show you, because that's important. So let's say you want to download this and use it in your project. So you can see in this particular case, Creative Commons icons. So it's got that Creative Commons. So I'm not a lawyer. Do check the licensing on each of these carefully. And you can download it as SVG and now extract some of these elements and add them into your PowerPoint. Of course, there are many other websites that also have commercial stock that you can download. And now you can see, with the power of SVG and combined with the graphic elements in PowerPoint, and how you can convert things into shapes, and how you can use that shape element as well in PowerPoint to customize these shapes here from the Format Shape menu. Really, you can create infinite options using native PowerPoint diagrams. So you don't have to go into Photoshop or Illustrator. So whether it's you and someone on the team, you can all collaborate and make edits to the diagrams right here in PowerPoint. Congratulations, now you know how to work with PowerPoint infographics better than most people do. Till next time, ciao for now.